"You should be grateful for any job," my boss said, lips curling into that arrogant half-smile he always wore when he wanted to feel powerful. "Single moms like you don't exactly have options." My breath caught in my throat. For a second, I couldn't speak. My fingers twitched against the edge of my notebook. I must have looked ridiculous, frozen in my chair, trying to keep my composure while my insides were screaming. All I could do was nod slightly, just enough to escape the moment. I forced my eyes down, pretending to scribble something meaningless. I couldn't let him see me flinch, but I felt it. Oh God, I felt it. Like a punch to the stomach I never saw coming. Richard Hale, my boss. The man who'd never once remembered my name without glancing at my ID badge. He didn't know anything about my life beyond the surface. Emma Carter, assistant, divorced, single mom. That's all I was to him. A liability, a burden wrapped in business casual. I sat there still as stone, while everyone else in the meeting avoided eye contact. No one said a word. The air was thick with that awkward, uncomfortable silence, the kind that made your skin itch. Someone coughed. Papers rustled, but no one said anything, not even a sympathetic glance. It was like I didn't exist. My hands trembled as I clutched my pen, pressing it hard enough into the paper that the tip snapped. I didn't react, just kept my head down. Inside, I was screaming. Why did his words hurt so much? Was I not enough? Was working until 2 a.m. not enough? I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, not from shame, but from something deeper. A pressure, anger, humiliation, grief, all tangled together in a silent storm I had no words for. Not yet. I walked out of that room with my spine straight but my heart heavy. Every step back to my desk felt like dragging 100 pounds of invisible weight. I sat down slowly, hoping no one would notice the way my shoulders shook ever so slightly. I opened an email just to have something to stare at, but the words blurred. My throat tightened. "Not here, Emma, not now. Hold it together. Just make it to 5. But I couldn't stop the replay in my head. His tone, the smirk, the sheer dismissiveness. I had been reduced to a punchline. And yet, under the ache, something else stirred. A flicker. A whisper. He has no idea who I am. He didn't know about the nights I stayed up after Lily was asleep, eyes burning, learning finance, strategy, startups, teaching myself what I never got the chance to finish in school. He didn't know I'd already helped build something from scratch, that I'd made moves, quietly, patiently, while keeping food on the table and a roof over our heads. He thought I was just stuck, powerless, forgettable, but I wasn't. That night, I lay beside my daughter as she slept, her tiny fingers curled around mine. The room was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the gentle sound of her breathing. And I knew what I had to do, because tomorrow I wasn't just walking into another workday. I was walking into his office. And I was going to say 4 words that would leave him and everyone else completely stunned. I bought this company. It's funny how people see only what they want to see. To Richard, I was just another overworked assistant, Emma Carter, the woman who handled everyone's calendars and coffee orders. Always polite, always early, always invisible. What he didn't see was the panic I swallowed every morning when I checked my bank account, the silent math I did in my head at the grocery store, the way I'd kiss my daughter goodbye with a smile, then cry the second I closed the door behind me. My world was a delicate balance of deadlines and daycare pickups, last-minute meetings and first-grade science projects. I'd mastered the art of pretending everything was under control, even when I was falling apart on the inside. The days were all the same. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., pack Lily's lunch, braid her hair while she told me about her dreams, then drop her off at school with a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Mommy will be there when the bell rings. Most days, I wasn't. Instead, I'd be sitting in that sterile, glass-walled office under flickering fluorescent lights, answering phones and fixing other people's messes. Richard's messes, mostly. He was the kind of man who never learned your name unless you could do something for him, and even then, he'd probably forget it tomorrow. He wore expensive watches and cheap cologne, always talking over people, always laughing just a little too loud. The type who assumed he was the smartest one in the room, even when he was dead wrong. The first time I met him, he barely looked at me, just waved a dismissive hand and said, "She'll do," like I was a chair or a coffee machine. I smiled anyway. I needed the job. Lily needed a roof over her head. That was all that mattered. At first, I tried not to take anything personally. I told myself he was just under pressure, or maybe that was just corporate culture. But little things chipped away at me. He never asked, but I stayed late to finish reports he forgot about. He'd call me into meetings just to have someone to blame when his presentations fell flat. And no matter how hard I worked, he made it clear I was lucky to even have a seat at the table, if I was even allowed at the table at all. I remember once, during a team lunch, someone asked what my daughter wanted to be when she grew up. I said, "She told me she wants to be the boss." Richard laughed. Actually laughed. "Better teach her how to make coffee first," he smirked. Everyone chuckled nervously, eyes flickering to their plates. I smiled too. I always smiled. That's what you do when you can't afford to speak up. But behind that smile, I felt something shift, a quiet, slow burn in my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. He didn't think I belonged here. And maybe I didn't. At his table. So I started building my own. Late at night, after Lily went to sleep, I'd pull out my laptop and study. I learned about business models, mergers, equity, branding, whatever I could get my hands on. I'd work until my eyes stung and my legs went numb from sitting. I didn't know exactly where it would lead. I just knew I had to be ready when the moment came, because I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life begging for respect. I wasn't just someone's assistant. I was someone's everything, and for her, for Lily, I had to be more. The day everything boiled over started like any other. I was already behind before I even got out the door. Lily had a meltdown over mismatched socks. I spilled coffee on my blouse, and traffic was a nightmare. By the time I made it to the office, my nerves were frayed. I remember rushing through the revolving door, forcing a smile at the receptionist, my heart pounding with that low-level anxiety that had become my constant companion. I barely had time to sit down before Richard's assistant. His other assistant, the one with the perfectly blow-dried hair and an allergy to actual work, popped her head into my cubicle. "He wants you in the boardroom in 5. No, hello. No explanation. I grabbed my notepad and headed to the conference room, heels clicking too fast against the tile. My palms were already damp. Something felt off. The kind of tension you can't explain, but your body knows before your brain does. When I walked in, Richard was already seated at the head of the table, legs crossed, flipping through a report with visible annoyance. A few department heads sat around him, looking anywhere but at me. I gave a polite nod and took the last seat near the door. He didn't look up. "We're going to start with the marketing numbers," he said, tone-clipped. "Emma, you sent this out, right?" I nodded. "Yes, yesterday morning." He held up a printed spreadsheet like it was a dead animal. "Then explain this," he snapped, pointing to a tiny discrepancy in one of the rows. "Why is the Q3 number off by 2 decimal points? I had to explain this to the board this morning." My stomach dropped. I leaned forward to look, heart racing. It was a formatting error, minor, nothing that changed the actual data. But the way he stared at me, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, it felt like I'd just crashed a plane. "I'm sorry, that was my oversight," I said, voice even, trying to stay calm. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You're sorry? That's helpful? I forgot that single moms have so much going on, it's hard to focus, right?" The room fell silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. My ears rang. My throat went dry. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Just air and shock. Did he really just say that? I scanned the room, No one looked up, not even a flicker of discomfort on their faces. Just forced neutrality, like watching a train wreck and pretending you didn't. He chuckled softly to himself and turned back to the spreadsheet. Try not to let your personal life interfere with your job, if you want to stay here, that is. Stay here. As if this job was some sort of favor, a charity he extended out of the kindness of his heart. My hands curled into fists in my lap. I could feel my fingernails digging into my palms, sharp and grounding. My body was shaking, but I kept my face still. I wanted to scream. I wanted to quit on the spot. But more than that, I wanted him to see who I really was. Not the struggling assistant, not the single mom he pitied and mocked, but the woman who was about to change everything. That night, after I put Lily to bed, I sat at the kitchen table in silence. No music, no background noise, just me and the hum of the fridge. I opened my laptop and pulled up an email I'd been sitting on for weeks. An offer. One that would make sure Richard Hale never spoke to me like that again. That night, sitting in the glow of my kitchen light, I stared at my laptop screen like it held my entire future. And in a way, it did. The email had been sitting in my inbox for nearly a week. Subject line: Acquisition Interest, Hale Corp. The sender? Madison Cole, a managing partner at Ravenbridge Capital, one of the fastest-growing private equity firms on the East Coast. I'd done freelance consulting for them under the radar for over a year. Anonymous contracts, ghost work, virtual strategy meetings, all after hours, all while working full-time for Richard. At first, it was just side income, a few hundred here, a few thousand there, enough to slowly build a safety net. But as the work grew, so did the trust. Madison had no idea I was also an assistant. She only knew me as Emma, the strategic consultant who saved their last portfolio company from collapsing. I reread her words for the 10th time. We're close to securing a majority stake in Hale Corp. The board is hungry for change, and your insights have been invaluable. We'd like to offer you an opportunity, not just to advise, but to lead. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My heart was thumping so loud I could hear it in my ears. Lead. That word felt foreign and familiar all at once. I wasn't just being offered a seat at the table. I was being offered the head of it. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled up the documents: purchase terms, equity structure, transition roadmap. My eyes scanned the numbers, the timelines, the sign-off requirements. It wasn't a fantasy. This was real. I thought about Richard's face in that boardroom, the smugness, the arrogance, the way he weaponized my identity like it was something shameful, like being a single mom made me disposable. But this wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming something I didn't even realize I'd lost: my voice, my power, my future. That night, I didn't sleep. I signed the preliminary agreement, sent it back to Madison with a thank you, and sat in the quiet for a long time. The fridge hummed softly in the background. The streetlight outside flickered. I listened to Lily breathing in her room, her soft, rhythmic little sighs that always made me feel like I was doing at least one thing right. The next few days moved fast. There were Zoom meetings at midnight while Lily colored quietly beside me, long phone calls during my lunch breaks. I met with lawyers in coffee shops, signed paperwork in parking lots, memorized pitch decks between school runs and staff meetings. At work, I kept my head down. Same tight ponytail, same fake smile. Richard had no idea. He still handed me his dry cleaning slips like I was his personal errand girl. I played the role perfectly. The quiet, obedient assistant. The one who always said yes, always smiled, always stayed late. But inside, I was changing. I felt it every time I hit send on an email that moved the acquisition one step closer to completion. I felt it in the silence after a late-night call, when Madison would pause and say, "You're going to make a hell of a leader, Emma." I still second-guessed myself. I still had moments of fear, crippling, suffocating fear, but I also had clarity. I knew what I was doing. I knew why I was doing it. Because Richard may have built the company, but I was about to transform it. And the moment was coming. Fast. The moment I'd walk into his office, look him in the eye, and say the 4 words that would flip our world upside down. The morning of the reveal, everything felt still. Too still. I woke up before my alarm, lying there in the quiet, staring at the ceiling with a strange calm washing over me. Not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that shows up right before a storm. My heart wasn't racing the way I thought it would. It was steady, focused. I got dressed slowly, deliberately, navy blazer, black slacks, simple makeup, hair tied back tight, every detail chosen with purpose. Lily was still asleep when I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Mommy's got something big to do today." Her little hand twitched in response, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. I drove to work with both hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles pale. My stomach fluttered, not from nerves, but anticipation. This was it. After everything. This was the moment. The building looked the same. Same tired brick. Same flickering lobby light. But I walked through the doors like I owned the place. Because now, I did. I made my way up the elevator, alone. I could hear the faint hum of the cables, the soft squeak of metal, the ding of each passing floor. My fingers clenched around the folder I was holding. Inside were the finalized acquisition documents. Signed, sealed, irrefutable. When I stepped into the office, people barely looked up. I was just Emma, after all, the assistant who blended into the background, the quiet one. I headed straight toward Richard's corner office. His door was slightly open, as usual, like an invitation no one really wanted. I knocked twice. He didn't even look up, just waved a lazy hand and said, Yeah, come in. Leave the weekly reports on the desk." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. He glanced up briefly and then back at his laptop. "Well, what is it?" I didn't speak right away. My pulse thudded quietly in my ears. I took a slow breath and walked toward his desk, placing the folder down in front of him. He finally looked up, irritation flickering across his face. "What's this?" I met his eyes. "You should read it." He opened the folder and started flipping through the pages. The shift in his expression was slow, almost theatrical. First confusion, then disbelief, then panic. His mouth opened, but no words came, just the sound of paper rustling under trembling fingers. "Emma, what is this?" His voice cracked, just slightly. I stayed silent for a beat longer than necessary, watching his bravado unravel. Then, calmly, I said it. "I bought this company." 4 words. That's all it took. He froze, eyes scanning the documents like maybe, just maybe, he'd misread something. But it was all there. The signatures, the transfer of ownership, the board's unanimous approval, the stamp of finality. He leaned back slowly in his chair, his face pale, lips slightly parted. You don't even have... How did you... I didn't answer that. I didn't owe him anything. His eyes darted around the room as if someone might jump out and tell him it was all a joke, but there was no one else here, just us. Finally, he asked, voice barely above a whisper, "What happens now?" I looked around the office that once felt so unreachable, so off limits. The same office where I'd once been lectured for taking too long to print documents. The same chair he'd lean back in while mocking me in front of a room full of people. Now I stood on the other side of the desk, and he was the one waiting for permission. I took a breath and met his gaze. "Now," I said, "we do things differently." After the reveal, the energy in the office changed. Subtle at first. Quiet whispers, hesitant glances, that awkward kind of silence where people pretend they're not talking about you but absolutely are. I could feel the weight of their curiosity pressing in from all directions. Some looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time. Others avoided my gaze entirely, unsure how to process what had just happened. But Richard, he avoided me completely. The man who once barked orders without a second thought now walked past me like I was a ghost. He never said another word, just packed up his office with stiff, robotic movements and vanished behind those glass doors for good. No drama, no tantrum, just a quiet exit. Funny how fast power shifts when it's built on fear instead of respect. In the days that followed, I spent more time listening than leading. I sat with departments Richard never bothered to learn by name. I asked questions. I learned their frustrations, the overlooked talent, the silenced ideas. I saw the exhaustion behind people's eyes, burned out from chasing approval that never came. I knew that feeling, and I wasn't going to let anyone feel it again. One of the first changes I made was creating a flexwork program for parents, especially single parents who'd been hiding their struggles behind fake smiles just like I had. I set up on-site childcare, pushed through mental health support, and opened leadership development tracks for people who were usually left out of the conversation. People started staying late because they believed in the work, not because they were scared not to. The company's energy shifted. Slowly, genuinely. We became a place where people looked out for one another, not over their shoulders. And every time I walked through the halls, I saw reminders of who I used to be and how far I'd come. I kept Richard's old office, but I rearranged everything. Took down the intimidating framed degrees and corporate awards, replaced them with community art, photos of my daughter, and one simple quote in a frame above my desk. Never forget who you were before they told you who to be. Every time I felt doubt creeping back in, because yes, it still did, I'd read those words and remember the girl who cried silently at her desk while everyone looked away. The girl who almost believed she wasn't enough. And I'd smile, because that girl didn't just survive. She owned the building. Sometimes people ask me if I did it for revenge, if I bought the company just to humiliate Richard, to get even, to flip the script. And sure, part of me wanted him to feel the powerlessness he made me carry for years. But mostly, I did it for Lily. I did it so she would grow up in a world where she knew she could take up space, so she'd never shrink herself to fit into a place that didn't deserve her, so she'd see her mother not as someone who got knocked down, but as someone who stood up anyway. And maybe, just maybe, I did it for every woman who's been underestimated, every mother who was told her career was over, every quiet voice that's been talked over, dismissed, or ignored, because we are not burdens. We are not lucky to be here. We are capable, brilliant, and powerful in ways they can't measure on a spreadsheet. And sometimes the ones who've been told to stay silent are the ones rewriting the rules. So if you're out there right now, doubting yourself, feeling invisible, feeling small, please hear me when I say this. You are not small. You're just waiting for your moment. And when it comes, don't whisper. Own it. If anyone's ever made you feel small because of who you are or what you've been through, remember this. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in quietly and buys the building.